somebody who is not in the wind and the cold this morning. We are speaking with Scott Baradell. He's in Dallas, Texas, and we're talking to Scott about an interesting topic. And our visit this morning is presented by Marcus and Mack, voted best law firm and best personal injury lawyer 3 years in a row and the best of Indiana County contests. Visit them online at marcusandmack.com. So a study, Scott, says people are more likely to share misinformation that sparks moral outrage than actual true facts. That's kind of disturbing, isn't it?
It definitely is, particularly as more and more people are getting their information from social media and social media influencers. And, frankly, not a lot of fact-checking is going on as information is spread.
So it brings up the question, obviously, why? What's behind it?
Well, a couple things. For the most part, we're not in what they call the monoculture anymore, where we're all getting our news from the same sources, and we tend to coalesce around people that have the same beliefs as us. And so when we see news and things that outrage us about the other side, for example, we just tend to believe it. It's confirmation bias. And then we share it because we get, kind of a psychic benefit from this idea of being part of a tribe. And that's, those two things combined can be pretty powerful.
Yeah, it does, though, doesn't it, somebody who isn't all that concerned about the actual value of the story, but more about whether they can get people all fired up.
Well, yeah, I mean, particularly among influencers, I think it's commonly known among creators, influencers on social media that controversy sells. They used to talk about clickbait in Google land, and now they talk on social media about rage bait, because if you can get people fired up, they're going to share it. They're going to, even if you as an influencer say something that gets people mad at you, I mean, that it benefits you often more than it hurts you.
Are we talking people who are actually out there being active influencers and are looking for clicks, or are we actually talking about just, Joe from down the street who wants to get somebody fired up down the other side of the street about something that he read online?
It's kind of all of the above. I'll give you an example. You often think about politics in this context, but it's not necessarily just that. I happen to have my spouse is a influencer in the home baking space, which would seem to be pretty non-controversial. But I will tell you, things get sparked up there, like, oh, someone's selling a course and she's not qualified to sell it, and looking into each other's backgrounds and sharing this information. It tends to be what people, it tends to be what people want to follow, not just the light and happy stuff, but the things that will get people mad.
Yeah, well, it can come down to the argument between Jif and Skippy and the cookies, can it?
That's exactly right.
But, in the serious vein of things, we're coming through a political season, and that's really become one of the great arenas of it all, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think if you look at what's happened in terms of how people are gathering information, a recent Pew study that studies media showed that among younger people, 40% are primarily getting their news through influencers today. And many of these influencers, they're taking the news and they're putting their spin on it. They're often, if you go back to Rush Limbaugh in the 80s, right? He took the news and then he said, you know what, I don't take it at face value. This is what I think about it, and he built a huge following that way. He's established the whole business of talk radio essentially. And what you have now is a million of those with Rush Limbaugh's, essentially with much smaller audiences in many cases, although some big audiences like the Joe Rogans, but many smaller influencers too that are all doing that same thing in so many different splintered groups that have different sets of beliefs.
Tell me about accountability and where it figures into this. It used to be, people even like Rush or those on TV with some of the network shows, they were being held accountable for what it was that they were saying. It doesn't seem to be that people are being held to that, even by their networks, if they happen to be affiliated with a big network these days.
Yeah, I think it's very hard because I think things, in compared to the 80s or 90s or even more recently, things have become so tribal in terms of people's viewpoints that it's almost like I don't care if someone on my side is lying because it's more important that I win than that I'm accurate. It's the means justify the ends. More and more, and I think that's what you see a lot is people simply not caring if it's right or wrong, as long as it helps them, achieve what they think is best in the end.
So let's talk about the ramifications of it. Obviously, if somebody is of the same mindset as you and is looking for the same sort of outrage that you're trying to engender, then maybe the ramifications aren't as serious as if you're trying to generate trust among somebody who is maybe a little bit more fair-minded.
Yeah, I think that you've got outlets that are trying, and individuals that are trying to be fair to both sides or to all sides of an argument, and you look at someone like a Joe Rogan. He obviously has viewpoints, but he is someone who, one of the big reasons for his popularity is that he is not aligned lockstep with one political group or another. He's his own person. And I think part of, even though he's imperfect, he's not a journalist, for example, and he maybe buys into conspiracy theories sometimes or other things, but he's someone who people follow every day and they trust him. They trust that even if he makes mistakes, that he's going to be his own person, as opposed to just spouting whatever, talking points, the political side he's chosen want him to spout. And so I think there's hope in people liking that kind of independent voice.
In the end, if your brand is not trustworthy, are people going to hold you to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of brands, it's a little different story because, with brands, you're trying to sell to everybody. It's like Michael Jordan said, Republicans buy sneakers too, and when he was asked to endorse the Democratic political candidate back in the day. And I think while celebrities, athletes, brands have all kind of been drawn into political fights, they have to be pretty careful, or they could do what Bud Light did and alienate half of its customers simply by the political stance it took.
Scott Baradell is our guest. He is a branding and trust expert. And so when we think about that, Scott, and we look at the trend toward misinformation as being more acceptable among certain segments of those, particularly those who are prone to get their news only from sources other than the traditional. When we consider all of that, how much harm can be done by this going 3, 4, 5 years out? Does it trend worse than it is even now?
Well, yeah, I don't want to be negative, but the trend has been going on for some time that people are part of this outrage issue is it ties to people becoming more and more extreme in their viewpoints as you kind of fall into a niche of the people that you're associating with on social media and follow. What tends to get rewarded is more and more extreme points of view. And so I think what we've seen over time, and there's no sign of it diminishing, is more and more people falling into more and more extreme points of view, and it makes it harder and harder for people to get along. There's been so much discussion about, should I go to, holiday dinner with my family if they, have different beliefs than me and things like that. And a lot of people are saying, no, you shouldn't. when I think that's so harmful, in terms of our connections within society. You have to be able to talk to each other. And I think this trend makes it way too easy for us to just be outraged with each other rather than talk to each other.
Yeah, and I think that there's also the aspect where people figure the audience is wide enough out there, and there are so many people out there that we can capture with misinformation that if we shed those who are less likely to trust us because of what we're saying, we can certainly pick them up in other sectors. That's probably a part of it as well. They're not that concerned if somebody gets too outraged with them.
I think you're absolutely right, because that's just the other side, right? Oh, they're not outraged because I'm spreading misinformation. They're outraged because they disagree with my point of view, and I think that's what a lot of people believe. You believe your side, and it's a lot easier to just believe what your side says than to try to take the time to research, everything. We need these kind of shortcuts in life because we're busy. We don't have time to be studying politics or the news or these kind of topics every day. We want to find people that we trust and believe them, and sometimes that trust is taken advantage of.
Big pond, there are a lot of fish in it. Scott Baradell has been with us here this morning. Scott, where do we learn more about you?
Well, my agency is called Idea Grove. It's ideagrove.com, and we do marketing and PR.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thanks so much for visiting with us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's the voice of Indiana County, WCCS.